Thanks for joining us on another edition of the Small Business Show with Jim Fitzpatrick.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for joining me this morning for another edition of the Small Business Show, exclusively right here at ASBN.com. Today we're talking about leadership, how recognizing, trusting, and motivating your team can make a huge difference. Ken Blanchard's ideas have shaped leaders around the world, and they're just as relevant for small business owners today. Joining us to share his story is Martha C. Lawrence, who is the author of Catch People Doing Things Right, How Ken Blanchard Changed the Way the World Leads. So, Martha, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jim. Looking forward to talking.
Sure, and congratulations on this amazing book. For those that are watching today's episode, there's a link right below the video that you're watching here at ASBN.com to get your copy of the book, which I highly recommend you do. If you do not know the name Ken Blanchard in business, then maybe you're not in business. I don't know, because this guy knows business, knows leadership, and you really got to get your hands on your copy of the book. So, Martha, thank you so much. First and foremost, what motivated you to write the book, and what do you want the reader to leave with?
Okay, well, first of all, what motivated me to write the book is there are so many biographies of business leaders who they do amazing things. They're innovative. I'm talking Steve Jobs, Elon Musk,
Sure.
Jack Welch, and they're fascinating people. But after working with Ken for 22 years as his executive editor, I know that the real guy walks his talk, and he is truly a leadership role model. He lives that way, and I thought, we need more stories of inspiring leadership role models, people who not only achieve success, but achieve it by lifting other people up.
Yeah, for sure. And then what? So that's really what you want people to leave with when they read the book.
What I want people, well, first of all, for your audience, Jim, Ken Blanchard started out as a university professor. I mean, he was a guy who was told in college that he couldn't write, and he went on to co-author The 1 Minute Manager, which sold tens of millions of copies and basically changed the way people did management. It influenced a whole generation and then became a pass-along book. It's still in print today, the new 1 Minute Manager.
Amazing.
So that happened. Then he was a university professor, and on sabbatical, he did a talk at a Young Presidents Organization event, and he was so charismatic and so compelling and had such a huge standing ovation that the people there said, "What are you going to do now?" And he said, "I'm going to go back to the university and teach." They said, "You can't. When you're hot, you're hot. You got to start your own company, right?" And he said, "I can't even balance my own checkbook. How am I going to start my own company?"
Right.
So for your audience, this is a story of a man who he didn't know anything about business when he started out, and it's about how you build a company and how you build a legacy, all while being a super nice guy.
Yeah, no question about it. Ken Blanchard has influenced leaders around the world. What is it about his approach to leadership that made him such a compelling subject for a biography?
Yeah, well, before Ken Blanchard came along, business books tended to be really long and dry and boring. I come from the publishing world, so there wasn't even really a business section in the bookstore. It was just kind of lumped into nonfiction.
Yeah.
And along comes Ken Blanchard. He writes this little parable book about a young man who's looking for an effective manager, and it really fundamentally changed the way people look at leadership. So. Did that really answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the guy's an amazing guy, and a book like this needed to be written about him, and you pretty much nailed it in here. So many of our viewers are small business owners, as you know, and entrepreneurs. And what key aspects of Blanchard leadership philosophy do you think that they can apply most effectively in their own organizations?
So what's different about Blanchard leadership is he was the beginning of the people-centered leadership. Before Ken Blanchard came along, it was all about results, systems.
Right.
And Ken, who had studied this at Cornell and University of Massachusetts Amherst, had some deep research about people really perform best when they're acknowledged. Hence the title, Catch People Doing Things Right.
Right.
You know, and he came up with, it's not just results, it's relationships and results. You take good care of your people, they're going to take good care of your clients and your customers, and that's going to take care of your bottom line.
That's right.
And so that's basically the Blanchard difference.
Sure. While researching the book, and as you said, you worked for him for many years, was there anything that surprised you or challenged your assumptions about how Ken approached leadership and management?
Anything that surprised me, I think what really surprised me, Jim, was how early Ken started studying leadership. You know, he was a popular kid, and he ran for president of his 7th grade class, and he won the presidency, and he went running home to tell his mom and dad. Well, his dad was one of his main leadership role models. His father retired as a rear admiral in the Navy.
Oh, wow.
And so he comes running home and he says, I'm the president of my 7th grade class. And his father says, Ken, that's great. We're really proud of you. But now that you have that title, don't ever use it. People follow leaders not because they have a fancy title, but because they trust and respect them.
That's right.
So that was a lesson that he learned early on. You know, his title throughout his career at the company was Chief Spiritual Officer. You know, he was really the head cheerleader. So for those in management running a business, you know, it's not your title.
No.
Don't throw your weight around. It's how you are with people.
Be that really servant leader, right?
That's servant leadership, exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
With so many teams now working remotely or hybrid settings, how can leaders adapt Blanchard's catch people doing the right thing philosophy and stay connected and keep, you know, the recognition meaningful?
Well, that's a really good question because, we're remote right now. You know, how do you have that personal touch? And Ken has always promoted the one-on-one meeting. You know, if you know, your job as a leader is to be with your people, and it's more important than ever now that we're all remote, reaching out, making a difference. All the things that you would do in person, you need to do those virtually. And, you know, not just when you get on the Zoom, catch them doing something right on your Zoom calls, you know, keep nurturing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, you mentioned servant leadership, Jim. Ken has, I don't know if your audience, a lot of people think servant leadership, that sounds like an oxymoron, right? How can you be a servant and a leader at the same time? And Ken taught about that. He said, you know, they don't understand there's 2 parts of leadership. There's the vision and direction, which is the leadership part. And then once that vision and direction is set, you turn that hierarchical pyramid upside down, and now you're at the bottom serving the people who are implementing that vision. So that's the basic theory of servant leadership.
That's right, for sure. For leaders who want to start implementing these ideas right away, what's one simple habit from the book that could make an immediate impact on their team or culture or performance for that matter?
I encourage people to follow the direction of the title of the book, Catch People Doing Things Right. Now, let me elaborate a little bit about that because it sounds facile, right? It sounds like it's not where you walk up and pat someone on the back and say, attaboy, attagirl.
Can't touch them anymore anyway, so it's, you know.
Yeah, you can't touch them anymore anyway.
You can't pat anybody on the back or you just can't do it.
Yeah, not meaningless and shallow. It's a truly effective praising is where you actually absorb what someone has done that has really made a difference. You know, when they're performing their job well. You tell the person what they did. You tell them how it made you feel. You pause a moment to let that sink in. And you acknowledge them and really say, this is the difference it made in my life. You know, an example, if somebody prepared a report that you had to present in a meeting and you go in there and it's a success, you say, wow, you know, I love the way you did that. It made me feel so prepared. It made me feel wonderful in that meeting. And, you know, thank you so much. And you're terrific, you know. So really go into it. And if you're not somebody who catches people doing things right, don't beat yourself up because we are programmed as human beings to filter for the negative. You know,
I
we
know.
have this negative bias, right?
Yep.
That's how we survived as a species.
That's
we
right.
looked out at the savannah, what's going wrong? Let's jump on it before it kills us.
Yeah.
And so it's actually having to reprogram that amygdala.
That's right.
You know?
That's right. And
So-
so many leaders
yeah.
and managers today and business owners, they're hesitant to show that kind of appreciation of their people because right away they think, uh-oh, that individual is going to be in my office tomorrow talking about a raise or asking about a raise, or maybe it's going to cost me, down the road with that particular associate. What's your take on that? I mean, we live in that kind of a society, right?
Yeah, and don't be afraid. Yeah, when I first started working at Blanchard and saw that people were not kept at arm's length, that there were real relationships, it felt very scary to me because it's like, what about if something like that happens? What if somebody wants to? And what I learned is it's all about transparency. You just tell the person, we don't have the budget for that raise, but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that you can't have a relationship with that person and acknowledge that person. Just be real. It's
right.
all about having that relationship and being close to your people.
Yeah,
Because if
and
you don't-
people want that more than money many times, right? They want to feel as though they're appreciated and that they're needed and that the boss, so to speak, is recognizing their efforts and the good jobs that they're doing, right?
Yes, it's an intangible. It's hard to measure that, but Margie Blanchard, who was president of the Blanchard organization for 10 years, she started something called the Office of the Future, and they studied trends, and they found that more than salaries, people wanted meaningful work. They, particularly that at that point, the generation that was just coming up, that younger generation, they want meaningful work.
Yeah.
They want to know that they're
That's
making
right.
a difference. So
That's right.
keeping those channels of communication open.
Yep, no question. Martha C. Lawrence, the author of this incredible book, which is Catch People Doing Things Right. And the Ken Blanchard really biography, right? And you did such a great job at it. As I said, there's a link right below this interview that you're watching to get your copy, which I highly recommend. This is a book that you're going to want to read, and you're probably going to want to pass along to those in your company, in your business, and maybe some of your colleagues. So again, thank you, Martha, for joining us on the show today. Very much appreciate it, and love to have you back because there's so many more questions that I couldn't get to because of time. But congratulations again on the book. Really appreciate it.
I'd love to, Jim.
Great.
Thanks so much. You're
Thanks.
terrific.
Thanks for watching another edition of the Small Business Show with Jim Fitzpatrick, exclusively on ASBN.com.